What's up, guys? Paulie Malignaggi of Paulie TV. How you doing, man? Great card last night with the women. I found it to be very entertaining, but we got a big one tonight as well. Edgar Berlanga versus Hamza Shiraz. Shakur Stevenson and Zepeda. This is a great doubleheader. Also, Morell is fighting Katiev. I think that's on tonight's card too, and that's also a tricky one as well. Good card here being put on by Riyadh Season. Again, regardless of anything, the boxing cards being put on here are typically very good. Nothing to complain about. Even the ones that there is to complain about, on paper they were very good, like the one in Times Square. You know, on paper it looked good, but in reality it didn't work out. So let's go right into this, man. I mean, Shakur Stevenson, for me, is a guy who has not been able to get the big opportunities that he's wanted. He's won world championships in multiple weight classes. I think he's the best fighter out of the lower weight classes, regardless of what people want to complain about him. I don't think he's a runner. I think he's a boxer. The Dos Santos fight was a difficult one for him, but he had a little bit of an injury. He's dealt with hand injuries, and of course, Dos Santos. Nobody has gone near him. Still, you know, people still have a fear of Edwin Dos Santos, who is sort of the boogeyman of the lightweight division. And nobody goes near the guy. So as much as everybody wants to criticize Shakur for that fight, nobody goes near Dos Santos to try it out themselves. And he's got some good wins. You know, Dos Santos himself has some good wins too. So it's not like it was a one-off tricky night. Dos Santos is a guy who's battle tested, and none of these top guys who want to criticize Shakur have gone after him after that. So I don't want to hear nothing about it. I want to discuss Shakur now with Zepeda though. Zepeda. One thing to keep in mind about Zepeda, didn't look great in the Farmer rivalry, the two Farmer fights. But one thing that you got going for him, he's fought, I think 5 out of 6 of his last opponents have been southpaws. This guy's been preparing for a showdown with Shakur Stevenson for a while. Now, does it matter? Will it matter? I mean, he struggled a lot with Farmer, but he also stopped Maxie Hughes, which is a solid stoppage on his record, you know? And because Hughes was a difficult guy and, you know, arguably may have deserved the Kambosos fight, right? May have deserved the win against Kambosos. So, you know, Zepeda steamrolled him. Has fought other southpaws. I think he fought Jojo Diaz, if I'm not mistaken. Or other southpaws. He's on a run of constant southpaws. It's not just the opponent. It's the constant training for southpaw angles. It's the sparring all the time, you know. So I think at this point, it's like, all right, put up or shut up now. Let's just throw Zepeda in with this difficult southpaw, Shakur Stevenson. Shakur, on the other hand, also, you know, is a guy who's been so good, been so difficult to deal with, that nobody has really wanted to sort of test themselves against him. You know, the boxing has, you know, done things to make other guys stars in the same weight class. Tank Davis, you know, who've been able to just, you know, manufacture themselves with low-level opponents. But you know, when it comes to Shakur Stevenson, I think this could be the moment here. With Riyadh Season now taking interest in him, I think that there will be enough money to start to drag these fighters who didn't want to fight Shakur now into the ring with Shakur, and we'll get to see just what kind of level Shakur is on. And you know, like I said, I've been believing that he's the best of those smaller weight classes, regardless of what you want to say. It's not always a factor when it comes to excitement value. Effectiveness and excitement value don't necessarily go hand in hand. I know sometimes we want them to go hand in hand, but they don't necessarily go hand in hand. Sometimes a fighter who's not super exciting is the best fighter. You know, people used to complain about Roy Jones. You know, people used to complain about Pernell Whitaker. People used to complain about Floyd Mayweather. These were all top #1 pound-for-pound fighters, and I think Shakur Stevenson has that level as well. But this fight against Zepeda is really a chance to make a statement here. You know. Zepeda will bring it with everything he's got. He's a big time pressure fighter. And I think that, you know, it'll give Shakur Stevenson a chance to show his best. But what if Shakur injures his hands? Now you got to deal with a guy who's coming at you, making you throw a lot of punches, making your output, you know, be a little bit busier than you want it to be, but your hands are bothering you. That could be a thing too. The other side of this is that if Shakur's hands are good, he's so sharp that eventually he makes Zepeda put his hands in his pocket, where, you know, he's sort of super hesitant even to pressure Shakur, and then the pace slows down and you got a dominant Shakur performance. Either way, it's a chance for Shakur to make a statement. It's a chance for Zepeda to make a statement after struggling with Tevin Farmer. But remember, Zepeda's been preparing for this, man. He's got 5 or 6 fights, or 5 or 7 fights, I don't remember which one it is, that have been against left-handers. Well, Katiev and Morell is interesting because Katiev failed a drug test, and there's a retroactive 2-year suspension that apparently the failed drug test was from 2 years ago. Check this out. This is how ridiculous boxing is. He said he's got a 2-year suspension, and they removed the 4 wins on his record since. Okay, the Katiev, the guy who's fighting Morell, but he's allowed to fight Morell. he didn't lose the money that he made in the fights where he was taken, the wins were taken away from him. Just the wins were taken away from him, and that for them is a 2-year suspension. But the money he made and the fight that he's going to get here with Morell, which probably the 4 fights that he won in those fights, even though the wins are taken away, those probably have a lot to do with him getting the Morell fight. Those aren't taken away. So it's basically essentially you get caught shoplifting, and like two years later, and they say, okay, well, you know, it's a 2-year sentence, but you know what, you already served the 2 years, but you don't have to give it everything you don't have to give what you stole back. You know, you just you know, that's it. You know, obviously the wins got taken away from him, but not the money he made in those fights. You know, so again, but this is one of those where boxing does absolutely nothing, no consequences, has no backbone. And Katiev is getting a shot here at Morell. Interesting fight, though, because Morell, you know, people will say Katiev doesn't have a lot of pro experience, but Morell also doesn't have a lot of crazy pro experience. These are two guys who had a lot of amateur experience. Just Morell's experience in the pros is a little bit, obviously, of a higher level. It's a lot of a higher level, actually. He's been in with Benavidez and some other guys like Hot Rod Kalajic and so on and so forth. Katiev hasn't been tested at all in the pros. This is his big step up. But again, these guys, these Eastern Europeans with a lot of this huge amateur pedigree, they tend to be pretty difficult as well. So I'm interested to see how Morell deals with Katiev, regardless of everything else, and of course the controversy of the failed PED test and whatnot. It's still a fight worth watching. You probably angle a little bit towards Morell. He's got a bit more pro experience at a high level, and Katiev hasn't been tested in the pros like this yet. But again, that huge amateur experience, you guys have seen, you guys have seen the guys from the East. They don't come up with a lot of pro experience, and they can jump right into contender fights and do well. So this is still an interesting fight on this card too. And so again, another reason why this card is a solid from pretty much top to bottom. Shiraz and Berlanga, the odds here have switched. Berlanga started out as the favorite. Now Shiraz is pretty firmly set in as the favorite. A couple of things to look at here. You know, Berlanga is a guy who is big at super middleweight. He's probably a super middleweight / light heavyweight. You know, good puncher, solid puncher. I'm not sure if he's the puncher that he seemed to be early in his pro career, but he's still a solid puncher. Who can physically sort of take over a fight if he imposes himself. Shiraz is a guy who had to move up from middleweight because he was starting not to look good at middleweight. The Carlos Adames fight was a bit of an iffy performance, but prior to that, he had some good wins at middleweight and probably has fought the better opposition. Canelo notwithstanding on the Berlanga record, Berlanga has not really stepped up to a high level. Shiraz has been in with some pretty good fighters and has some pretty good wins. The Adames fight didn't look so great for him. The Berlanga fight against Canelo, for me, also wasn't really a great look, even though he got praised for it. So I think these two guys who've never been world champion, mind you, have a lot to prove here because they've been thrust upon us as guys who are to be looked at, to be viewed, and possibly some of the future stars of these divisions. And I don't necessarily disagree. I think they're good fighters. I think they're very promotable fighters. And I think there's an upside to both of them. But I think this fight will go a long way in solidifying one of them as a possible bona fide star in the division, because he'll have a chance to really secure himself as a world champion rather soon. Canelo's going to be leaving soon regardless, and the world championships, the real world championships, will finally be unlocked from their prison that they've been kept in by Canelo defending against second-rate opposition the last few years. And yeah, I count Berlanga as second-rate opposition, not because he's a bad fighter, but because Morell and Benavidez were there at the time when Berlanga got the shot. And those guys definitively deserved the shot at the World Championships before Berlanga did. But regardless, this is a big chance for Berlanga to prove himself here. It's a big chance for Shiraz to prove himself here. You know, this is a really solid matchup, and I think it's really evenly matched. You know, you talk about maybe Berlanga has an upside advantage here because he's the naturally bigger guy. Shiraz has been down in one of his fights. I think it was against another Puerto Rican fighter. I forget the guy's name. I think it was Torres or something. He was down in that fight, but he got up and got him out of there right away, you know. But on the other side of it is Shiraz has been in with better opposition, you know. Berlanga's also been down, but that was against Canelo, so it's a bit more. It was a bit more forgivable. There was also another fight where he was down, but either way, Berlanga has had moments in his career where he's been swarming, you know, and looked really terrific. So I think a solid main event. I think it's why it's a main event, even though it's not a title fight, and Shakur's fight is a title fight. I think it's the main event because obviously Berlanga being a New Yorker, and also this fight is very evenly matched on paper. Very difficult to pull these guys apart as far as who we think is going to win. You know, I think it's a really a pick-em fight, and the odds have shown that, and that's why it's a solid main event. So that's the card for tonight for Riyadh season. It's in New York, big New York weekend. As last night the women also put on in New York City. I'm Paulie Malignaggi. This is Paulie TV. I'll try to give you guys a breakdown of the post-fight afterwards, but I'm working the Probox TV card tonight, so you guys got to give me a minute to check on my post-fight stuff, because I got to check out these fights after the Probox TV card. Solid Probox TV card as well if you guys want to go back and forth on your TVs. We have Vladimir Hernandez, who's a super upset spoiler guy against I think it's Veron. I forget the guy's first name, Veron, but he's an Olympian from Argentina. He's got one loss. He's been solid as well. Solid matchup. We got a good card on Probox TV. So check us out. Even flip back and forth if you want. I think you guys will be entertained by the boxing tonight. Big boxing weekend, but we're getting ready for next weekend's huge boxing weekend. I'm Paulie Malignaggi, Paulie TV.